Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the zoo. The minion with me right now is Adam.
How's it going?
And I'm the keeper for the night, Sanguine. How you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing all right. How about yourself there, sir?
I'm doing well. I just finished most of my dinner. I still have potato roasting up in the oven.
Wow,
But
taters? What's taters, precious?
nice. So I have the baked potato roasting up in the oven. Then I have surf and turf tonight. So a good New York strip, beautiful medium rare, and about half a pound of shrimp. With also a quick coleslaw that I made just with vinegar, salt, cabbage. Good to go. And I just popped open a bottle of Smithwick's as my drink tonight.
Smithwick's? What's a Smithwick's?
Smithwick's is one of the several beers brewed by the Guinness Brewery at St. James Gate. It is the one that I have is the Smithwick's Red Irish Ale. So it uses the same strain of yeast, if I remember correctly, but a different combination of grains and different flavor due to that. So it isn't as dark and chocolatey as a Guinness is. This is a bit lighter. It isn't as rich or as thick. Just a really nice, light, pleasant beer. Not really light. It's kind of mid-range. But I love Irish Reds, and the Smithwick's Irish Red is fantastic. Pretty much every Guinness beer is amazing, with the exception of the Guinness American Lager. And all I have to say about Guinness American Lager is they succeeded in making an American lager. The sad thing is, American lager is piss water.
Yeah. What do you think that is? Is it like the flavor, or is it just like the strength of it?
You've had a Miller before, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Miller and Bud. Yeah, those are American lagers. And they just don't have a depth of flavor, and what flavor they have is just kind of... So it's piss water because it doesn't really taste all that great. It's kind of like it has the color of slightly diluted piss. It has all the flavor of slightly diluted piss. It's just not good. Whereas when you're going for a darker beer like a Guinness that has this rich, almost chocolatey flavor to it, and just that deliciously thick taste to it, also a slight creaminess. When you're going for red, it has a nice blend of malty notes with a bit of bitter, just absolutely delicious. And you can go for lighter colored beers and still have them taste good. Like a lot of Asian beers are ridiculously light, but they aren't by any stretch of the imagination piss water beers. They taste fantastic. And as to what Mr. Yes asked from chat, what was my favorite Philip Gaff? That is hands down either... Well, actually, no. There's a tie for first between two of them. But the two favorites that are by far and wide my two favorites are Don't Stay Here Too Long, Lads, or else you'll get all slitty-eyed. And when he's watching I think he was in Africa. He was either in Africa or he's in Australia, and it was a group of Aboriginals. I can't remember if it was African tribesmen or Aboriginals putting on a performance for him. And he's watching them dance, and then he leans over to the man who he's watching this performance with and goes, "So, do you lads still chuck spears at each other?"
Ooh.
And it's just the fuck, Philip? How the hell do you go to China and tell 2 English exchange students, "Don't stay here too long, lad, or else you'll be all slitty-eyed"? And how the fuck do you watch a group of black people dance and then lean to another one and go, "So do you chuck spears at each other?" The fuck? It's amazing because you clearly don't give a shit, but the fuck, man?
Oh, yeah.
So those are my 2 favorite Philips. Just because it's... what the hell? And last night I also put the first coat of finish on that wooden ring I was carving. I'm going to give it at least another layer or 2 so that it gets a thicker and harder finish on it. But it looks nice. The stain actually really brought out the runic carving that I put on the face of it.
How long have you been working on that one?
That one I pretty much banged out in 2 days. Not 2 days of full work, but it was... I did a little bit of roughing out before one of my streams, and then I had my camera on and I showed doing more roughing out. Then I stopped working on it about halfway through working on the ring, and then picked it up the following day. Just finished up the shape, got the hole as large as I needed it to, smoothed it out, was sanding it during one of the streams that I was on. It was Prospero's stream that I was sanding while talking. And then at the end of that stream, I carved in the runes, sanded it smooth again, and then yesterday I just painted, or not painted, but rubbed in some of that finish that I have. So just a couple more layers of that, and that ring will be done. And then I'll start figuring out which bit of knot work I want to try to carve next.
Now, is this the first type of ring that you've worked on, or?
Yeah, it's the first ring.
Nice. If it goes successful, do you think you'll do another one, or?
Perhaps. It was more just flight of fancy that I decided to carve a ring. And it was just kind of I wonder, can I get a decent looking ring that is able to survive being on my hand? And I wore the wooden ring today. It hasn't broken yet. And like I said, I'll give it that second and third coat of finish, which will make it a bit more durable. And no, I'm not trying to summon anything, Eloin. It's just I have always had an appreciation for the look of Elder Falthark runes. And due to that, I decided to carve 4 Elder Falthark runes into the face of this ring. So I have Uruz, Elgis, Tirvas, and Yera carved into the ring.
I don't know, man. I mean, if this ring turns out pretty good, I might ask you for one for my own.
Fair enough. Yeah, once I get the finish done how I like it, then I'll again show it to everyone and let them give me their opinion on if it looks good. I had to keep it a bit thick and a bit chunky because I'm using not the hardest wood in the world, so I didn't want to make it too thin and make it really easy to break.
Well, I mean, I'm getting the image of, I believe, what was it? I think it was the Ring of Nero, where it was like a stone ring, um, with like gold pieces inserted into it, but it looked like a thick ring, like one of those like candy rings, and so like yeah, no, I can imagine that a wooden ring would be kind of thick on your
Yeah,
finger, but
it's kind
hey,
of thick. I was able to thin out the sides decently so that it doesn't kind of force your fingers apart when you put it on your finger. But yeah, I need to
I don't
put
know,
the
man. I
finish
kind
on.
of
And
that's what you'd kind of look for, like, yeah, look at this.
yep. Yeah, it looks impressive to my mind, and the runes on it really worked with its thickness. Because if I had done a finer carving on it, then it would have looked almost cartoonish how large it is. But with the runes, it looks appropriately sized. And it would have been cartoonish looking just due to the size because of the size of my fingers as well if I hadn't have put anything on it. Because I mean, shit, the center hole is larger than a standard cork. And that's the size that I needed in order to just get it onto my fucking index finger. Not even my middle finger, just my index finger. And to those listening along in chat, I know several of you have the ability to hop into streams. If you want to be on tonight, do give me a shout and I will toss you a link. And am I going to give it a light coat of resin to give it durability and waterproof it? The finish that I'm using is Watco. Let's see, it's Watco Amish oil. Let me quickly double check that it is that product. But yeah, it's one that gives it a note of waterproofing as well as hardens it a fair bit. And just double checking. Yep, it is Danish oil. Watco Danish oil is what I used. And I used the Golden Oak Watco Danish oil. So like I said, I'm going to be giving it another layer or two of that. See how it looks. And hopefully that'll make it nice and durable. I might at some point get one of the darker variants of the Watco Danish oil. But the Golden Oak looked fairly nice on the basswood that I've used on thus far. And that's the type of wood that I carved the ring out of. It's just basswood. So like I said, not the most durable. It's not ridiculously soft either. It's just a standard carving wood. So yeah, I'm hoping that it does prove to be as durable as I want it to be. And then I'll be fine.
What do you mean durable? Like, I mean, how much durability does just a normal ring need to have?
Things that end up on my hands tend to need a fair bit of durability. I mean, I wear a Fitbit on my wrist, and I've cracked the screen of my Fitbit like 3 times.
No.
And those things have a decently thick screen. It's just, I forget where my hand is sometimes, and will whack it into something. because it doesn't hit hard enough to hurt my hand, but it'll hit hard enough to ding up my Fitbit, or I've actually put a couple dings in one of the rings that I wear, where you can tell just slightly, if you look at it in the right light, where it must have been smacked against something that was just a little bit harder than it.
It left a mark.
Yeah, I've dented up the Celtic knot ring that I wear a little bit. Like I said, it's not massive amount of denting, but it's enough that if you look at it, you can see some dents and dings.
Let me show somewhere, huh? Well, hey, that's it's causes it to be a little bit more authentic,
Yep.
It's, battle damaged.
And also, Elwyn brings up that just daily using your hands and the oils from your hands wear down rings a fair bit. Though the oil from my hand will be less of an issue when it comes to the wood, because that'll actually, to a certain degree, help preserve the wood. The moisture from sweat or anything like that will be more harmful than the oil.
Wait, does it really? I mean, I don't know. I don't wear rings, so I don't.
Yeah. Just it's kind of like the erosion of a rock due to the wind. No single breeze is going to strip away a chunk of rock, but over time it is able to carve out. And just over time you'll smooth out sections that were once raised up on a ring and flatten them out. And your oils and moisture will react with certain metals, also just provide that little bit of lubrication so that it causes it to move just a bit more. And it gives enough lubrication to let it move, but it's also enough that, or not enough that it completely smooths out what it's running over. So you get just this very fine abrasive, effectively. So yeah, it's something that actually does happen. So people need to go in, get their rings reworked, get some repairs done, because you'll just wear them out as you wear them. Certain metals are less likely to be worn down than others. Some of them are more reactive, so sweat causes bigger issues. Some of them are less reactive, but softer, so the sweat isn't that big of an issue, but the dings and abrasion are more of an issue. So it changes depending on what type of ring. And there's certain rings that are kind of in that happy zone of not really reactive and not really terribly soft. So there's silver alloys that are fairly durable as rings. Whereas like high purity gold rings, those wear down quick.
Damn. And so people still wear these things?
Yeah.
Even though they're slowly deteriorating on their finger?
Yeah, and it's the reason why when you're talking rings and golden rings, you'll normally hear like 18 karat gold for the ring is normally about as high as people want to go. Because when you get to 24 karat, that's when you can deform 24 karat with just your fingers.
Is like a putty?
It's not putty. It's just you can pinch it hard enough that you can squish it slightly.
But that's more valuable?
Oh yeah, 24 karat gold is the highest purity gold that you can get. So it's more valuable because gold is very valuable. Whereas normally 14 to 18 is where a lot of rings are made, because that is enough impurity in the gold in order to stabilize it a fair bit. But it's still high enough gold that it isn't you're wearing just a like gold plated bit of bullshit. And yeah, resizing and cleaning rings is really common and needed quite often. And like I said, you can get some repair work done as well, where they'll effectively add on a bit more material.
Hey, I wonder if Geodes has any insight on this topic.
More like than not, he does.
But resizing, you could take a like a normal ring and then just like add on to it, and then that would be the same like.
So it depends on how large of a change you need. Every ring has kind of a plus or minus X amount that it can be scaled up and scaled down. If it's a very small change, then it tends to just be, for instance, if they're sizing a ring up, they literally just have this a drift. That's what it is. It's a bit of blacksmithing or metalsmithing, goldsmithing, silversmithing. Pretty much every type of smithing has something called a drift. And it's this cone-shaped object. And the jeweler's drift will have the different ring sizing marked out on the cone. And they'll just take the ring and very lightly tap it down to where it needs to be resized to, in order to widen the center hole. Like I said, you can also get rings repaired. You can get additional material kind of put back on, but that requires more work than just the standard resizing.
Whole new forging of the ring.
Yeah, effectively.
3,000 years ago.
If you're trying to add material, you have to almost remake the ring, depending on how much you need to add.
Wow. So I guess if somebody presents a significant other with a very elaborate ring,
you want to get the size right the first time.
Well, yeah, you'd hope so. How would you even gather that? I mean, you have to like snag one of their existing rings.
Or there's sizing guides, and most people know what size. Or most people, if they're interested in that sort of thing, know what size ring they are. Like I have my first ring that I got, and then I wanted to get a couple more rings, so I figured out the size for each of my fingers. And like my smallest fingers, my pinkies, they're 11 or 10 and a half 11s. My largest fingers when it comes to ring sizing, my middle fingers are 16s, which, for frame of reference, the largest standard size ring that you'll typically find at a store is a 13.
Jeez.
So effectively, if I were to get rings for my middle fingers, I'd have to custom order, because 13s will fit my ring fingers and my index fingers, with the exception of my right index finger, which at one point was up to 16 as well. So, yeah, you have to know your sizing. There's sizing guides. You can do it either with a tailor's tape, wrap it around your finger, see what the tailor's tape reads in the circumference, or there's plastic guides that you can get, and with the plastic guide, all you do is it has a shit ton of different ring sizes. You stick your finger in the different ring sizes and figure out which one fits. And you want it loose enough that it doesn't start pinching off circulation or anything like that, while being tight enough that it won't just fly off your hand. And yeah, if you're off by, like I said, I think it's most rings they'll do up to like a size, maybe a size and a half resizing. But if you get it so that they're off by half a size, that's easily resized. No problem. Unless you have an extremely ornate ring that's just constant gemstones around the entire band. And that just reminds me of the thing that I find the most ridiculous about The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings.
Uh-oh.
Because there's a ability of the ring that has to be there. But I don't think it's ever directly mentioned in either of the, at least movie series. I think it was mentioned in the book series, but it definitely wasn't in the movies. And that was that the ring has to resize itself for whoever the fuck picks it up. Because there's no way in hell that Frodo had the same thickness of fingers as, like, Gimli.
Oh, yeah.
And you don't really hear about someone getting the one ring and going, well, shit, it doesn't even fit me.
Well, didn't they show that the ring kind of changed shape, at least in the movies? I mean, yeah, I'm sure they didn't address it in the books, but actually, no, now that I think about it, I don't think.
Did they mention that in the movies at all?
Yeah, I could have sworn I saw, like, it changed shape for when it went from Sauron, when he chopped his hand off.
Mm-hmm.
It shrunk for when Isildur. That was him, right?
Isildur, yeah.
Yeah, and when he took it, I swear it shrunk for him. But I could be wrong. Yeah.
I could be as well. Like I said, I don't remember it being there, but I could be wrong.
I mean, I'm happy to watch the movie again to make sure. So,
and yeah, Elwyn gives the same sort of advice that I was, that if you're going for extremely ornate, pick the ring out with whoever you're getting it for. That way you can have them try it on and see that it's the right size.
Yeah, but you can't surprise your partner with a ring if you don't know her or your partner's size. I
think there's certain stores that do have a window of, if you have it back to us in 30 days, we can resize, or we can give you a size up or size down type clause.
Yeah, could I even mention this? That's a weird. Adam doesn't talk about this. That's weirdo. fucking conversation. So, you had a steak, right? For lunch, dinner?
For dinner.
Yep.
Yep, beautiful New York strip. I forgot to dry brine it last night, so it just got a few hours dry brine today, but still turned out beautifully. Beautiful, medium rare all the way through. Just absolutely fantastic flavor. Cooked it off in my cast iron because I didn't feel like breaking out or not really breaking out because it's set up behind me, but just letting the water bath for the sous vide come up to temperature and then dealing with that. So I just tossed it into my cast iron, got a nice crust on it.
Hey,
And
what do you think about air frying?
I haven't used an air fryer yet, and I've heard some mixed things about it. I've heard people swear up and down that it is exactly like frying. I've had other people say what I think is more likely, that it's just a really small convection oven. And that seems like it would be more the case. So you have convection ovens, which have specialized fans that move the air around the oven and circulate it so that it's more consistent heat throughout the entire oven. Also, it allows everything to cook a little bit faster. And then you have conventional ovens, which are effectively, it has a heating element typically at the bottom for baking. And that heats up, just heats the air standard in the oven. So the hot air rises to the top of the oven, and it kind of heats from the top down almost because of that. And it doesn't get as consistent of a temperature because you'll always be the hottest at the very top of the oven and at the very bottom near the heating element, with the middle of the oven being cooler than either of those two extremes. The convection oven moves it around, so all the air is effectively the same temperature within the oven. That's the difference between a conventional oven and a convection oven. Just the air circulation. And an air fryer seems like it should be effectively a convection oven mixed with a salamander or broiler, depending on which term you prefer to use for that. And that seems more reasonable to me than it being like frying. You can get a similar effect from a convection with broiler, but it won't be the same. That makes sense?
Yes. I mean, I guess it's just like, it seems like it's going to be cooking in a weird direction. I mean, would you try it if given the opportunity?
I'd try an air fryer, yeah, but like I said, I'm willing to bet that it'll come out more like a salamander and convection oven, just due to how the heat transfer goes. Because the thing about deep frying that makes it deep frying is that the heat transfer between the oil and the food in the oil is extremely quick. So you end up being able to get the food cooked faster than if you're sticking it in an oven or under a salamander, for instance. And it tends to have more extreme mild reactions than under a salamander or in the oven. which is why when you throw something in oil for deep fat frying, it gets that golden brown and delicious. That golden brown and delicious is due to Maillard reactions on meat. And if you're talking about the breading or batter, that's due to caramelization. So, like I said, it's something that I would be willing to try out, but it's not something that I think would be exactly like frying. And every time I hear someone say, yeah, it's exactly like frying, I don't really think I can entirely trust you on that. Because it doesn't make sense that it would be exactly like frying.
I'm honestly interested to see what you would do with it.
I'm probably
just because you have this skeptical viewpoint on it, that means that whatever the outcome is, I mean, we're obviously going to see. I mean, hopefully it's not a completely biased thing, but we'll see an actual like, yeah, I came in there skeptical, and this is what we got.
Mm-hmm. And there's certain foods that you can deep fry that I don't see any way in hell that you'd be able to cook them in a air fryer. Like, how the fuck are you gonna batter food and cook it in an air fryer?
I don't know, man. Honestly, air fryers kind of newfangled technologies for me, so I'm still learning on it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, cooking on its own, I'm not gonna say I'm a top chef or anything, but I mean, I still don't understand how to use a crock pot. So let's be realistic. I'm not the perfect choice to ask for this in quandary.
Crock pots, you use them when you either want to keep something warm or when you have something that requires a long, low temperature to cook properly. So, pot roast.
Yeah, I thought you put like a chicken in there or something like that.
You can do a chicken, but you end up with more of like a stewed chicken rather than a roast chicken at the end. But you can do stewed chicken in a crock pot. You can do pot roast really easily in a crock pot. Chilies, stews, stuff like that. But if you're trying to get that beautiful roast chicken, don't use a crock pot, use an oven.
Well, roast chicken,
Yep. And ideally, if you have the space in your oven, hang roast your chicken. You will thank me if you hang roast your chicken. Though not many people have an oven large enough. I mean, shit, I don't have an oven large enough. I can hang roast a Cornish game hen, and that's about as large of a bird as I can hang roast. But hang roasting just allows the air to circulate around the entire bird. So you get crispier skin around the entire bird. It's fantastic. It's effectively rotisserie chicken without a rotisserie.
So you don't have to be turning it over, huh?
Yeah, when you're hang roasting, all you do is you suspend the chicken, and I recommend throwing like potatoes and shit like that underneath the chicken so that it'll drip down into all the fat and juices will drip down into potatoes and flavor them up beautifully.
Do you think it's possible to do that over like a grill?
You'd need, if you have a really tall grill, you can do it. The easier way of getting a similar effect, not the same effect, but a similar effect, mind you, is you can do beer can chicken.
Beer can. What's beer can chicken?
Beer can chicken is you take a beer, you drain out about a quarter of a beer. So get a beer can, drink about a quarter of the beer can, shove in whatever herbs and garlic and whatever that you want to flavor the beer as well into the can. You shove that can up the ass of the bird.
Oh,
You season up the outside of your chicken, or rather, you season up the outside. You can butter up the outside if you want. You can season the inside of your chicken as well. Then, with your chicken sitting on this beer can, you go out to your grill. You set it in your grill. As the beer heats up, starts to boil, it starts steaming up through the center of the chicken, flavoring the chicken from the inside out, also keeping it really moist. And you just end up with crispy outside, moist inside. It's a good way of cooking chicken. Like I said, though, you need to drain off at least a quarter of the can. So, drink a quarter of your can of beer before you shove it up the chicken's ass.
Or you could pour it out for the homies, I guess.
That's a waste of beer.
Yeah, that's true.
It's kind of like how when we were hanging out for the 4th of July, if you had poured out a shot of green spot, I would have slapped you.
Yeah, I wouldn't have even thought about that.
Yeah.
That was tasty.
That green spot's fucking delicious.
Yeah.
I need to see if I can find yellow spot as well. Though I think yellow spot is almost twice the price of green spot.
Ew.
Yeah. Yellow spot's by the same brewer. Or not brewer, but distillery. And I think they're technically a distillery as well as a bonded bottler. And what I mean by a bonded bottler is you have distilleries that actually produce all of their alcohol in-house. Then you have bonded bottlers, which they don't produce the whiskey themselves. They get the whiskey from a different distillery, and then they bottle and brand. So it's a different process.
Wait, what do you mean? Like
So-
they make it in one area and then they bottle it in a different area? Or?
So, for instance, you know Jameson, of course, right?
Yeah.
So
I believe I've heard that name.
Jameson whiskey nowadays, I think, might have one bonded bottler, one or two bonded bottlers. And I think one of them, I'm trying to remember, I think Green Spot might be one of them, but they do a slightly different deal with Green Spot than they do with their other bonded bottler. The other bonded bottler gets barrels of Jameson and labels for bottles. And then they bottle the Jameson out of the barrels. They slap the labels on and they sell. And that used to be the way that most Jameson was sold. And then Jameson started doing the vast majority of its own bottling. Then there's the other type of bonding that you can do with it, which is you sell the distilled alcohol before barreling it. Then the company that you sell the distilled alcohol to barrels it in their own selection of barrels. And then they age it. Once it's aged, they bottle it, brand it, and sell it. That make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it does.
Yeah, the only other way that I could explain it, and I'll toss this explanation out in case it didn't make sense to anyone else. Let's say I make whiskey. Let's say I have my own still that I make whiskey in. I could sell whiskey to Adam by bottling up the whiskey, slapping Sanguine spirits onto the bottle, and sell that bottle to Adam. And Adam could then have his bottle of Sanguine spirits, or let's say Adam wants to sell Sanguine spirits to people around him. He can buy the already bottled Sanguine spirits from me. I sell them to him. He gets them. He sells them on from there. That all makes sense, right?
Not really, because I'd probably just want to keep the bottles that I buy.
Like I said, that's option number one. You keep it yourself.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah.
So
surplus. It's,
yep.
share them.
So
like
option number 3, rather than doing either of the first two, he's not buying from me and then just keeping for his private store, nor is he buying the already bottled whiskey from me and then selling it on. But let's say instead of buying bottles, he wants to buy a barrel, but he wants permission to sell the whiskey on past buying the barrel. So,
hold on. In all fairness, dude, having a barrel of whiskey.
oh yeah.
How rad would that be just to have that in the corner? It's like, what's that? Oh, that's my barrel of fucking whiskey.
Oh yeah, trust me, I would fucking love having barrels of whiskey.
Oh shit.
So,
all right, continue. I'm sorry.
Let's say he still wants to sell whiskey on after getting a barrel of whiskey from me. But it's whiskey that I made, I produced, I barreled, and then I sent on to him. So we come to an agreement that, sure, he can sell the whiskey on from him buying the barrel from me, but he isn't allowed to adulterate the whiskey. So he can't water it down, for instance. And in order to make it easier, because he's not allowed to change up the recipe, I'll make it easier for him to sell it on. I'll provide him with the labels, and I'll send him empty bottles. Now, I'm saving on labor costs because I'm not having to bottle that shit myself. And I'm selling him the whiskey. He doesn't have to produce the whiskey himself. He just has to pay the people to bottle it up with the bottles that he's getting and the labels that he's getting. And then he sells it on. So that's the first sort of bonding. The second sort of bonding would be option number 4. Adam really likes the way that I distill my whiskey. But let's say I'm using American white oak and sherry barrels. But he wants to do a aged whiskey using, let's say, a hickory and apple wood barrel. So rather than buying the already aged whiskey from me, because that'll do him no good in trying to age his whiskey how he wants it flavored. Instead, he comes to me and he goes, "Hey, Sanguine, you produce really high quality distilled spirits. Can I buy the unaged distilled spirit from you?" And we come to an agreement that he can buy that unaged distilled spirit from me. He then gets it. he ages it himself, then he bottles it and decides that he's going to sell it on as well. Because he's now aged it, he's changed the flavor enough that he can sell that under his own label, rather than using the Sanguine Spirits label. That's the fourth type of bonding. Or, sorry, the second type of bonding, which is the fourth way that this could work. That all makes sense? And that makes sense is to you people out there as well, not just to Adam.
Yes. I hope it.
Can you let people tell me I really like whiskey?
I mean, for I'm not gonna lie, for a bit there, I was hanging on to the concept of a barrel of whiskey, just hanging out in the corner of my room.
Oh yeah,
or my dining room area, and I was like, yeah, this. But yeah, no, I know what you're saying, man.
Mm-hmm. Now the question is, would you keep it so long that you have to downsize the barrel? Because that's something that people forget about. As things are stored in barrels, a certain percent of what's stored in the barrel will evaporate. A certain percent of it will get soaked into the barrel. So the longer you store something in a barrel, the less of it is in that barrel. And at a certain point, you'll need to transfer it to a new barrel. Which is actually how the highest grade, or the only true version of balsamic vinegar is made. It's actually, balsamic vinegar. Just like all vinegars. All vinegars come from an alcohol. It's a necessary part, or all natural vinegars, or let me phrase it a different way, because all natural vinegars technically makes it sound wrong as well. So all non-laboratory synthesized vinegars are a product of a sort of alcohol. Now, the type of alcohol can change depending on the type of vinegar. So you can make blackberry vinegar. And it would be, you take blackberries, you make blackberry juice, you add certain types of yeast, now you have blackberry wine. Then you allow that blackberry wine to turn to vinegar, and you have blackberry vinegar. So
wait, so does that blackberry vinegar have like if you used it on like a salad, does it have like a blackberry flavor? Or...
Yes, it would have a blackberry flavor.
Oh wow. Okay, that's cool.
Yep.
Shit.
So,
damn it.
You then can barrel that vinegar.
Fucking
and
Doctor.
age that vinegar.
Thanks, Dr. Sanguine. I'm learning a lot tonight.
Yep. You can then age that vinegar. And just like I said, when it comes to whiskey, when you age something in a barrel, a certain percent of whatever you're aging in the barrel over time ends up evaporating. A certain percent of it ends up leaching into the wood. So every year that you've stored something in barrel, the amount of that something that you have in that barrel decreases. But what you're storing in the barrel also leaches out different flavor compounds from the barrel. So, for instance, whiskey goes in completely colorless. When you get freshly distilled whiskey, that's moonshine. Moonshine is colorless. It's the aging process in the barrel that gives it that beautiful amber color. If you do that with vinegar, which is what's done with balsamic vinegar goes through several different generations of progressively smaller barrels. I think it's like 7 or so generations of barrels. Let me quickly double check. Balsamic aging. And how many barrels does it go through? Because it goes through a shit ton of barrels. And this source doesn't tell me the number of barrels. But yeah, it goes through a shit ton of barrels. Each barrel progressively smaller than the previous barrel. And at the very end, you're left with this very rich, thick vinegar that has absorbed the flavor from the various woods. So they use, it's apparently 6 different sorts of wood for the barrels for balsamic vinegar. They use chestnut, cherry, oak, mulberry, ash, and juniper. And as they move it through the barrels, each barrel allows it to absorb different flavor compounds. And like I said, each barrel is smaller than the last because there's less of the vinegar to move, which means that that's the main reason why real balsamic vinegar is insanely expensive. Because they'll make a massive batch of the vinegar that balsamic vinegar starts as. But by the end of these progressive barrel changes, they'll go from having like a full-blown hogshead, I think is the barrel that I'm thinking of. Let me quickly double check.
Did you say hogshead?
Yeah, there's a hogshead barrel.
Oh, shit.
It's... I always forget the conversion. So, no, it's larger than the hogshead. They'll start with a full ton cask. And that's TUN, not TON. They'll start with a ton cask. And then they'll size it down until rather than having the ton cask, you'll end up with like a runlet, which is about a 50, or actually, a runlet is 1/50th of a ton. So massive size decrease as you go down the barrels.
Gee, yeah.
Which is why it's so fucking expensive, because it takes a lot of work to get the vinegar that goes into the first barrel. And then it takes 12 years of changing barrels and swapping barrels before they're able to get the finished product, which they need to recoup all the money for the barrels, all the money for the initial vinegar, and then all the years of people checking the barrels to go, is it ready to swap yet? No? Okay. Ready to swap? Yep. Okay, let's swap it. So real balsamic vinegar, ridiculously expensive. Most of the balsamic vinegar that you get in grocery stores is not actually real balsamic vinegar. The balsamic vinegar that you get in most grocery stores is grape must, some wine vinegar, some caramel, and then a good chunk of them add in like gum or corn flour in order to thicken it. And grape must is the result of pressed grapes. So after you press the juice out of grapes, you're left with grape must. And that's how most balsamic vinegars that you buy in grocery stores are. Yeah, traditional balsamic vinegar, fucking expensive as hell. Because they have to press the grapes. Then they add the grape must back into the grape juice. They cook it down. They get it all thick and amazing. Then they ferment that. Then after they ferment that, they have to go through acetic biooxidation, which is there's a specific type of bacteria, or not really specific, it's a family of bacteria, it's Acinetobacterus. That say again?
No, it's a family of bacteria.
Yeah.
It'd be like a ABC show back back in the 80s, you know.
So it's Acinetobacters take over. They form the mother of vinegar. The mother of vinegar then transforms the alcohol within the at this point it's still wine, but once the mother of vinegar starts taking over, it's transforming the alcohol content of the wine into acetic acid, which is what gives vinegar its sharp taste. And then after the mother bacteria has run its course, it's then removed from the product at this point. Then the vinegar, the young vinegar, is then aged until you get to the smallest cask. And then after all of that shit, they're actually able to sell it and turn a profit. Which is why it is expensive as shit.
Yeah, but how does it taste, though?
Oh, it's complex as hell. It has a fantastic flavor.
Do you think it's worth it?
Oh, yeah. If you can afford it, it is worth it. Yeah,
I always wondered that. You know, expensive foods that are, you know, one of a kind types of tastes. It's like, yeah, but when you eat it, is it like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, for the balsamic vinegars that you tend to get in stores, in a standard grocery store, versus the traditional, the high point of the grocery store one is if you're getting like a 250 mil, you might end up it being like 60, a little bit more bucks. That's the starting price point for traditional balsamic. And traditional balsamic goes from that like 60 or so bucks up to about 400. And by the way, for the traditional, like I said, for the one that you buy in store, that's normally around like 250 mil. For the traditional, that's the price for about 100 mil, so less than half. And you're looking anywhere from like 60 bucks to like 400. For
Jesus, 400?
Yeah, like $400 for a 100 mil bottle of traditional balsamic. Like ridiculously expensive.
See, that's another thing too. Like aged drinks. You know, like I'm pretty sure there's some old ass bottles of wine sitting out there that are just ready to be popped.
But
Ew, that sounded weird.
if you're talking old as hell distilled spirits and also certain types of wine, yeah, it is,
And also wine. You need a lot of wine for those spirits.
it is insane how expensive it can get.
Oh no. Oh no. Yeah, but I don't know, man. Expensive food always baffled me, you know. Cheap
Oh,
food always baffled me too, you know. Like, Jesus.
it's a matter of knowing where to splurge and where to save. Because there's certain things that you don't need to really splurge on. And then there's other things that, oh no, splurging makes a fuck ton of sense. Like steaks, buy the best steak that you can.
Oh yeah.
It just massively steps up your meal. Ground beef, you can get away by saving on ground beef. And shit, you can actually make a more flavorful ground beef a good chunk of the time for less if you are willing to hand mince your meat.
Well, I mean, I guess you should be willing to hand mince your meat either way, you know.
Yeah, hand mincing it, you can get absolutely insane flavor because there's a bunch of really tough cuts of meat that are cheap as hell but just have intense beefy flavors. And I see Jen in chat. Jen, do you want to join us? So,
Oh no.
yeah, I figured I'd invite on Canuck, especially since she started talking maple syrup.
Yeah, that's just. Oh my goodness. Yeah, you should grind that meat and then add some maple syrup.
But yeah,
I bet you that's what she's gonna say.
you can get like iRound. iRound is, or at least it was, everything's price is going up now. But for the longest time, I could buy iRound at $1.99 per pound. So $2 a pound. And it is insanely beefy. It's just tough as shit if you don't cook it right. And even if you cook it right, it's still kind of tough. So what you end up doing is if you get the iRound, you hand mince that shit. Because once it's minced up, the texture does not fucking matter because now it's just the texture of ground beef. And if you get iRound with a good fat cap, or if you aren't able to find iRound with a good fat cap, just get some suet, mince up some suet, throw that in with the iRound. Now you have an amazing fat content in your burger, and the suet costs maybe like $2-3 per pound, if that. And you don't need to use all of that. You could get away with like a quarter pound of suet, if even that much, and a pound of iRound. Make an amazing mince, and boom, fantastic hamburger, fantastic shepherd's, or rather cottage pie, or anything else that you're using ground beef for. Hey, Pop, how goes it? Do you want to link, Pop? It's rare to see you around on Fridays.
Yeah.
Hello. Hello, puppy.
Hello, how goes?
Oh, it's good. Yeah, I did actually Google that. I was like, well, that's an easy one. Google doesn't get mad at me for looking up maple syrup.
You mean
Hi,
it
Jen.
doesn't default as the Google homepage?
You would think, right? It'd be like the blood of Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Maple syrup price index. I mean, it's the hallmark of your economy, isn't it?
yeah. We do have some that goes up to that price though. Like there are some grade A maple syrups. I'm just surprised at the brand though. It's one of those things I've joked about with myself, with my European friends especially, because I mean you guys have your own maple syrup. I wouldn't buy from Canada if you have your own.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Wait,
just
what do you
stupid.
mean we have our own maple syrup?
Oh yeah, you guys grow your own.
Vermont.
Oh yeah, you guys have good maple syrup.
Oh,
Yeah,
Yeah,
Vermont maple.
yeah, I give credit where it's due. You guys have good maple. It's just anywhere else in the world, it's expensive as shit. So it was always kind of this joke that if I made really good friends with, people from foreign countries, I'd send them good bottles of maple syrup. Like, something expensive for me is probably twice as expensive for them.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. I also,
And also talking about the obscene price that you can get for certain distilled spirits or distilled and aged spirits. Just looking up some of the most expensive commercially available
mm,
whiskeys.
mm-hmm.
There's one that is currently on sale for a mere 72,000 that is normally at the price of about 85,000. And that is a extremely old type of Macallan. Because that's the 1950s exceptional single cask 67-year-old Macallan whiskey.
See, I I had to throw one in there because you were talking about liquor, and I was like, can you use maple syrup to make booze? Yes, you can
Yeah,
effectively make mead out of maple syrup. I'm gonna look that up and try it. I'm gonna definitely look it up and try it. And if it's good, I'll send you some Sanguine.
sounds good.
what maple syrup mead?
Yeah,
I figured it had
yes,
to
sir.
be. Yeah, I figured it had to be because it's a syrup effectively. It's a high concentrated sugar. So I was like, mead is honey, isn't it?
Yeah, mead is typically honey, but then I'm trying to remember because there's a bunch of different styles of mead,
Mm,
and I think isn't it the maple mead is Asoglin?
yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Fuck yeah!
Yeah.
I don't know. I just like conjured a whole party of Canadian D&D parties,
See, that's
and
actually when you start to sweat when you're American, because that's how the British convince us to help them burn down your White House. Because that's
no,
what happened.
hey, hey,
We
hey,
we
you
were
didn't know the
Wait,
Canadians didn't burn down the White House.
no, it was the British, but you have to
It was the
understand that the
British.
Canadians, the Canadians at the time, were British.
Oh,
the
jeez.
Canadians were convinced by the English launching a D&D party?
We
I
were
Yeah.
think that's what you just
How did
ended
probably,
up saying there.
to be honest with
how
you,
did
they
you
were
get to
probably in
that?
charge, but I don't doubt that there were some hotheads over here because a lot of us were Scottish too.
What the-
That's
Mm-hmm.
really what it is. You got a mixture of Brits, you got a mixture of Scottish, and yeah, we had our Irish kids too.
And now
But
you're attacking the Scottish? Hold
I am
on,
I am
Jen.
Scottish. I am absolutely tacking on
Hold
the
on.
Scottish because if you want to get something done, you just get a Scotsman to get drunk enough to go do it.
There's a reason why the ladies from hell were one of the most feared units in the English military.
Hold on. Well, color me confused. The hell? I'm still. Hold on. Wait.
Have you not heard of the ladies from hell?
No, I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to remember what she fucking said at the beginning of that thing. Like,
Hmm.
holy shit.
Hey, if you wanna get something done, you get a Scotsman drunk and pissed.
Why
It's
would you
kind
want
of
to
like,
piss on the Scotsman?
do you know the last time that any modern army did a bayonet charge?
Mm.
Any guesses?
Wait, what?
I'm trying to think how long.
When was the last time that any modern army did a bayonet charge? Or I'll rephrase it.
Mhm.
Any First World army did a bayonet charge?
I'm thinking probably in the 1800s, but I'm not sure.
World War II?
Yeah.
Adam got much closer. That's the second to last time.
Mm.
And
Because I was thinking there might have been one in like the Korean War.
I just
I
couldn't
don't
remember.
think Vietnam. I'm only strictly sticking
No,
with America.
No, you're
'Cause,
probably right. You guys know American wars better.
going with America's the right gut feeling there, because the last two both had the same two groups involved. One of the groups were American Marines.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Anyone care to
Definitely.
guess what the other group was?
The Scotsman.
Yes, it was a fuck ton of Scotsmen.
Fucking Scotland.
So
God
the most
bless you.
the last time that a bayonet charge was done was in Operation Iraqi Freedom.
Fucking hell. By Scotsman?
It was done by American Marines and Scotsmen.
Holy shit.
Yeah, they were ordered to take, and this is also one of the great things. The stories are almost fucking identical, except for their location. Because in the Iraqi incident, they were ordered to take these three positions. There was a supply line issue. They were running low on ammo. So a bayonet charge was ordered. All the men affixed their bayonets. The order to charge happened. Holy shit, all the men charged. They ran through the first position. They took the first position. Immediately after taking the first position, they ordered a charge. They took the second position. What the fuck? Immediately ordered a charge. They took the third position. And that was the most recent charge. The time that it happened in World War II, the Scots and the Marines were in a specific area. They were ordered to take three positions. They were running low on ammo. So the order went round, affix bayonets. They affixed bayonets. Order went round to charge. They charged. They charged to the first position. What the fuck? They took the first position. They ordered a charge immediately after. They took the second position. How the fuck did you take two positions with a bayonet charge? They ordered an immediate charge. They took the third position. What the fuck?
Hey man, when there's a full battalion running at you with fixed bayonets. Nope, I'm done. I'm sorry.
It's because they're crazy enough to just go do it. Like it's one of those things where I feel bad for Scotland now, because wherever the hell their balls are, they need to find them. They really do, because they've always been impressive for that. Like, you know, it's one of those things where I laugh at my ancestry, because yeah, we've failed miserably several times, but no one can shade us for our bravery. No one can shade the Scotsmen for their bravery when they're really wanting to do something. And that's kind of where my family is, because we were like, fuck you, England, we're going to Canada. Ah, shit.
It's almost at the point where I worry that the Scots might have suffered what I hypothesized the French did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because when you look at the Middle Ages,
They were badass.
the French were
Scary
fairly
shit.
brave.
They were scary as shit, and they were in charge. As much as people don't want to acknowledge it,
yeah,
they protected.
Charles the Main.
Like they were in charge for a long time. Like it wasn't just the Nords. There's a
And-
reason why England spoke French.
Well,
Sorry, England,
that
you-
was because it was Old French and it was
Yeah.
the Normans who... There's a reason why Norman and Norseman
Yeah.
sound the same. It's a very easy explanation.
Yup.
A bunch of Norsemen were raiding and went, "We want land." And the French went, "Well, you kicked our ass, take that land." And I went, "Okay." And then after a couple generations, the French went, "You're still on this land?" "Yes." "That's technically our land." "It's ours."
It's
"Well, will you at least swear to the king?" "Fuck it, sure. It's our land, though."
I think it's because I've been super nice to Quebec this week, but it's also one of those things that, as butchered as the language is, theirs is still technically the closest thing to Old French as you're probably going to go, depending on the region of Quebec. It's one of those things I give them credit for, because you kind of have to.
Oh no, are we gonna start going into the?
No, I'm being nice to them because I feel like we're kind of in the same boat of shit right now. So, like, between our province and their province, I feel like we should be looking at each other and going, see, this is why I told you to vote for Bernier.
But yeah, I honestly believe that what happened to the French was they kept on sending their best and bravest.
Mm-hmm.
And for a good while, it was working. And then they sent their best and bravest to Agincourt. And holy fuck, that's a lot of them dead.
Mm-hmm.
Or,
Lot of them
I always... It's Agincourt and then Creasy in order, right?
Yeah.
So, then they send a bunch of the best and bravest to Creasy. And fuck, that's a lot of them dead. They eventually end up at a position where they haven't necessarily beat England, but both England and them reached a point where they went, "Let's stop fighting for now." Okay. We're gonna fuck off to our island. You stay the fuck here. Okay, good to go. And then they were good for a while. They decide to send a bunch of their best and bravest to help out in the American Revolution. That worked out well. Then a bunch of their absolute fucking insane bastards decide to have a revolution. They kill off a shit ton of their best and bravest. Then a Corsican midget takes over. That Corsican midget finds the rest of the best and bravest, decides that he'll lead them in a merry little campaign. Does remarkably well, but again, that's a lot of the best and bravest dead. Eventually loses. That's a lot more of them dead. Gets kicked away, sent off to another island. Comes back. Does it all over again. Gets his ass kicked. That's even more of them dead. Several of his officers who were, or marshals, who were exceptionally badass, to be perfectly fucking honest. Napoleon had some amazing marshals in his army. End up getting executed for their part in Napoleon's bullshit. That's more of them gone. Franco-Prussian, that's more of them gone. Then Napoleon III, that's more of them gone.
Mm-hmm.
World War I, suddenly they don't really have that many best and bravest anymore, do they? The ones that do exist still, that's more of them gone. World War II, they're almost fuck out of them. So, surrender. The ones that still exist became resistance, but not enough.
To be honest, I feel for them right now. Like, I mean, the French right now are still fighting. Like, it's just internal struggles. You know, I don't know how they're going to turn out after all this, but Macron's been really bad for them.
What are they, on the, 12th Republic?
Yeah. Yep. You know, but I can't judge you guys, France, because I mean Canada's in a shitty boat too. So like I'm not really wanting to judge anybody. I just look around and I see us all kind of sinking at different paces, and we're all just kind of struggling at different ways. And I'm like, maybe we should make like the ants and actually form a land bridge and figure out how to float. You know what I'm saying? We gotta figure out how to float here at some point. Uh,
I keep saying what we need to do is we need to just start re-inhabiting the old World War II islands.
mhm.
Because that's something that I don't know why it isn't talked about more.
Mhm.
America made a fuck ton of islands during World War II. And by made a fuck ton of islands during World War II, I mean legitimately made islands where there weren't islands
Yeah.
during World War II. We should still be using those islands.
Yeah.
We fucking made them.
I don't think you're wrong. Like I think it is coming to the point where we might end up being at a point where the map might just end up needing to be changed. The world map might just need to be changed, and that's not a bad thing. It's just change.
Mm-hmm.
And it's scary, but as long as it's just so that we can keep peace in the world and keep people from fighting, it might not be a bad thing. Because sometimes people need to separate each other from each other until we can come to a point where we can talk again.
See, what we need to do is we need to become a multi-planet race.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because I'd rather do that and know that people are peaceful and happy and healthy than the misery that we're causing each other. Because that's where I'm at. Like, sorry, I had to avoid the internet this morning because the freaking church shit that's going on up here. Like, it's kind of traumatizing me. Like they've set that thing up like a concentration camp. There are 2 fences around a fucking church.
Wait, where?
Graceland Church, the one I know you guys saw the video with the Polish priest
Mm-hmm.
freaking
And
out
they
at the
put a
MRT.
fence around his church now?
They put 2 fences around his church.
Get the fuck out of here.
They are now congregating on the farmland next to the church because the farmland is privately owned, and they've said, hey, you know what, you guys can come on here because
Fuck that.
Yeah, because nobody is in agreement. We have atheists going down there and showing support because we don't agree with it.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want church or government interfering with each other. We do not. We never have. Canada, even though I'm not Christian per se, I was raised here. And we are Christian. And that doesn't mean they get away with shit. That doesn't mean they get to interfere with how our laws are made. They don't.
I don't like this
But
at
if
all.
but if they want to congregate because it's part of their religion, which it is, that's what the meaning of church is to congregate.
Mm-hmm.
And they can do it safely, and they can do it safely. They can do more sermons and stretch out how many people are allowed in the room at any given time. They can do more of them so people have time to go. But they should still be allowed to go, because if you're going to go to a mall, if you're going to go to a grocery store, if you're going to go anywhere, if you're going to sit in a fucking plane or a fucking bus and then tell these people they can't do the same thing effectively, as long as they're doing it safely, that is not my right to stop them to do that. It is not my right. It is not. It is my right to support them in their rights to do what they want to do, as long as they're doing it safely. And yeah, they have been wearing masks. Some people do wear the masks in the church. Some people don't. They were keeping the spacings in the seats like you're supposed to. I'm sorry. As far as I'm aware, as long as I'm 6 feet away from everybody, I'm fine.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sick of it. I'm sick of. I'm sorry. I was really upset by that. Like, it's just. And then you go to Quebec and it's the same thing. And like I said, I'm looking at Quebec and I'm just like I said, as much as you didn't like Maxime Bernier, if you had chosen him, between you and us, we could have fought this off, because we're both being shit on. Everyone in Canada is being shit on, but like, it's very noticeable. And the only people who are fighting back are Ontario, and it makes me so frustrated. Like, I thank you, Ontario, for speaking out for everybody so much.
Mm-hmm.
You know, thank you guys a lot for doing that, because so many people here can't. Like, it's not that we don't want to, it's just we have nothing left to lose. If we lose anything else, our families are fucked. Sorry, I'm not meaning to cry or be whiny. It's just
Not a problem.
whew, that upset me so much this morning. Like, I'm not too different from you guys when it comes to like actual rights and freedoms that people are supposed to have.
Yeah, and
It gets to
governments
a
are far too quick to say, well, we really get to decide what rights you get. No, you don't, motherfucker.
You know, oh, it's for your best interest. I'm like, no, you're actually burying more people than you are saving right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the fact of the matter. You know, you are actually choosing the one guy on the track to save instead of the 5.
Mm-hmm.
And what you should have been doing is you should have been focusing on stopping the train instead of running over anybody. And instead you've chosen the one guy and you're killing everybody else off.
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like, have either of you seen the smear attacks that they're trying to do on DeSantis?
Oh, I don't. Yeah.
Yeah, and probably one of the most disgusting ones that the Young Turks did, and I think I've seen several other people also do this, is they're citing a study that when you look at the actual data for the study doesn't say what they say the study says or what the people who did the study say that it did. Also, when you get the rest of the data that was omitted from the study, it really fucking doesn't say what it says that it says. And they're using that to go, people are mad because Cuomo was absolutely hiding information, and people even admitted that he's been hiding information when everyone's been doing it. I mean, DeSantis has been artificially lowering numbers, according to the study that they cited. When you look at the actual data and ignore what the person who said that they proved something with this study is saying, the data does not say what the person says. It's one of those FBI, the leading threat to America is white supremacist. By the way, Muslim terrorists account for 1/3 of all terror attacks within the United States, according to that same study. And no white supremacists did not account for the remaining 2/3. And even if they did, population differences would still mean that Muslim terrorists commit acts of terrorism at 37 times the rate. But yeah, it was one of those papers where it's the data's not saying what you're saying it's saying. How the fuck do you get your own data this wrong? And then you get the rest of the data, and turns out it's even more off than just the data that they use not saying what they were saying, but all the data is screaming, this is wrong, and they're using that in order to attack DeSantis. And then they went after him for the Publix thing a while ago. And did you guys see the 60 minutes one versus the actual full sound clip?
No, I haven't. Or if I have, it was through Monkey.
So the 60 minutes one has them asking the insanely slanted question of, did you choose to go to Publix first for the vaccine rollout because they were a major campaign contributor to you? Then they keep the part of his response where he says, I knew you guys would ask this question, They then, after having the "I knew you guys would ask this question," cut out everything that he says from that point until he says, "We approached Publix as one of the people to roll this out." They then cut out everything after that until he then continues, and Publix has successfully rolled out vaccines in these areas. What they cut out in that first bit was we didn't start with Publix. What we did was we went to CVS and Walgreens. CVS and Walgreens spearheaded the effort in order to get the vaccinations into extended and assisted living facilities. Once that phase of the vaccine rollout was accomplished, and it was accomplished very well by CVS and Walgreens, we went to our phase 2. Our phase 2 was to get the shots into the community. So what we did was we looked at where the greatest number of old people lived within our state, the greatest number of people that were at risk lived within our state, and then we determined what pharmacies were in the greatest numbers in those areas. We came up with a list of 5 to 7. We reached out to those 5 to 7s, or 5 to 7, cut back into the 60 minutes. Publix was one of the ones that got back to us. Cut out. They were, in fact, the first to get back to us. So we launched a test program using Publix as well as the other ones that got back to us early on. And then I personally went down into those areas and started asking people that live there how they found the experience, if everything was going well, got information. I had other people go to the other sites and do the same sorts of questioning. And we got back the data that, yes, it was working. Cut back in. So we had Publix providing vaccinations, and they were doing a fantastic job of it. Cut from the 60 minutes again. They cut out all of the context that showed that he was wrong. And then the person restated the question again in the 60 minutes. They used the restate of the question, and then they used his fairly annoyed response of, "I just disabused you of that notion. I just explained why what you just said was wrong, and you continue to ask that question, not because you actually care about what was happening, but because you care about scoring a political point." And they kept that in the 60 minutes bit. They took out everything that explained the process. They kept in him saying, "I knew you were going to ask this question. Publix came to us to talk about administering vaccinations. Publix is now administering vaccinations, and they're doing a fantastic job. Did you allow Publix to administer vaccinations, and did you approach Publix to administer vaccinations because they were a major contributor to your campaign? I just disabused you of that notion, and I explained to you why that was wrong, but you're still asking that question because all you care about is scoring political points." That was the sound bit that 60 Minutes used. They got rid of everything else. They got rid of the entire explanation. They took 3 segments from his initial response, and then they took his annoyed response from having the same person ask the same question after he just spent like 2 minutes plus explaining in great detail how they were wrong. And they kept his annoyed response back as a, "Are you fucking kidding me?" I just answered your question on this. Knowing that they had clipped out all the response just so that it seemed like he was referring back to the non-answer that the clipped out sections were. It is unbelievably loathsome that they did that and they pushed that as if it were news.
That's the thing that's blowing my mind. That all this stuff is going on in front of us. Like they don't think we all have the ability to look this shit up.
Yep.
You
And
know?
that's where that started to trend, because it was trending on Twitter and a number of other social media for a bit, because someone got the full clip of his response and the 60 minutes clip, and what they did was they showed the video of his actual response, and wherever the 60 minutes clip had used the audio, they layered the audio. So it was, when you heard the audio twice, it was the 60 minutes and his actual answer being played at the same time. And when it was just one audio, it was because that section had been clipped from the 60 minutes. So it was just, the fuck is wrong with these people?
It just blows my mind. Like it's actually really pissing me off. And the guys up here are no different from yours.
Mm-hmm.
In all honesty, the only news place that I can go to for information on things like the Graceland Church is the fucking Rebel.
Yep.
I don't want to go to the Rebel. They're not necessarily bad, but they're leaning. They're very, very much like, this is our story tag. This is what we want to talk about. You know, so I want middle ground people. I want the other guys covering this stuff, but they're the only ones doing the interviews with the priests, with the people that go there. They're the only ones talking to the people in the neighborhood. You know, so they're actually getting the information. So it's like, well,
Yep.
who else do I have to go to? Because none of our guys are covering it.
And here's the deal.
Tucker covered it. Tucker covered it before our guys covered it.
Yep. I want the middle ground people, but I have absolutely no problem with the people that they go, here's my bias.
At least they're honest.
And now let's go into the story. When you know and they admit to their bias, they don't piss me off. The people that piss me off are the ones that go, we're objective news.
Yeah.
We are not spinning it one way or the other. Here's a 30-second audio clip from 4 different sections of an answer that entirely cut out his entire goddamn answer. And this is what happened at the news conference, or at the press conference. But again, we're entirely apolitical. Fuck you, you lying sack of shit.
You know, it really burns my mind that they do that, because it's like they don't think people are rational at all. Don't get me wrong. I realize that North America, or like the West in general, has a mental health issue. We really do. But if you're not presenting people with the story, you're going to cause them to be more crazy. You're going to cause them to be more crazy. People can look at a story and come to their own conclusions if you're honest.
And out of curiosity, did you guys also entirely discard your asylum system? And by asylum system, I mean, in the States, we used to have state asylums where if someone was...
That's actually a really scary point, because
provably insane.
We don't have the same asylums as we used to. That's not to say that we don't have some. Like, we do have a couple, but they've shut down the majority of ours. You know, we aren't too different from you guys in the sense that most of our homeless population are people who probably should be in a mental home.
Probably most of your prison system as well.
it's a constant thing. Like we're always, you don't get the breakouts very often, but when you do, everyone is alerted because you don't know who's walking on the street when it happens.
Mm-hmm.
And we have had incidences like that, where yeah, you got lucky, you didn't catch that one. um, but it's just we do have a much smaller population than you guys do. So like,
Yeah.
But in terms of per capita, I'd say we're probably higher than you.
See, the
Yeah.
thing was, and this still pisses me off, and it's something that absolutely enrages me whenever I think about it. We had the asylum system.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't perfect. It wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination. There were some asylums that were absolute shit, and they were absolute shit from the day that they were opened. We had others that were fucking brilliant. There was one, if I remember correctly, it was in West Virginia. I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah.
But the way that it was set up in the early days and throughout most of its life, what it did was it would get in the patients, and all the patients there had to be provably psychological issue. Had to have provable psychological issues, effectively.
Yeah.
They had to have hallucinations, mental defects, and schizophrenia, shit like that.
Mm-hmm.
And what they would do is that person would start living at the facility.
Mm-hmm.
They would start administering the drugs to the people that lived at the facility.
Mm-hmm.
And if a person, while on medication, was lucid and capable, they would then strongly encourage that person to get a job.
Yep.
And it wasn't just get a job at the facility. They had certain jobs that, yeah, if someone wasn't able to get a job elsewhere, they would hire them at the facility as like, hey, Bob, who is severely mentally disabled, not able to do most work, but can push a lawnmower. Bob, you want to be the groundskeeper?
Okay.
And they would have Bob do groundskeeping, and they would pay him. They wouldn't be charging him for that shit. They wouldn't pay him less than what he should have received. They paid him an honest wage. And the people that they were able to get jobs elsewhere, they would send to get jobs elsewhere. And the deal was that these people, yep, you get to live a normal life, with the exception of at this time, and this time, you have to be at the facility. And if you aren't at the facility at this time, and this time, we will send someone to come get you. And the times that they had to be at the facility were their medication times. So you'd get your morning dose, you'd get an afternoon dose, and they would send people to various jobs if the people were working outside with the meds. And it was yep, as long as you're taking your meds, as long as you're behaving, then you're good to go. You get to continue doing all the stuff that you're currently doing. We won't force anything different on you. And that facility was fantastic. It was so great that even when it closed, even though it slid a bit towards the end, when it closed, there were people that had been going there and living there that kept on going back to see that. Kept on going back with the hopes that it would be open again.
Yeah, that's so sad.
And we closed that down because what happened in a lot of the facilities is the same thing that's happened in a lot of correctional facilities. We have overcrowding of people going in. We have chronic and critical understaffing. And when you have chronic and critical understaffing, the way that you have to get out of that, if you want it to actually turn about and work out well, the way that you have to deal with that is you have to increase the pay of the people doing the job. Because here's the thing, with every goddamn job, there's a price point where people will look at that job and go, okay, that job sounds like it's kind of shit, but for that money, yeah, I can deal with that. That's how we get sanitation workers.
Mm-hmm.
Sanitation workers get paid a fuck ton more than a lot of other jobs, because who the fuck wants to be going through the sewer system breaking up fatbergs and shit in the sewer system for minimum wage? Fucking no one would. So what you do
You
is...
certainly don't see the feminists asking for those jobs.
Yep, and what you do is you increase the pay until you get to that point where people are going, for that pay, yeah, I can do that job. And then once you get to the point where you have staffing, and you have the staffing that you need, guess what you can also do? You can start being selective about who you hire. Because now it isn't just, fuck it, we need an ass in that seat. You are only half qualified for this job? Fuck it, we need that ass. You get in that goddamn seat right now. So you're able to start being selective. So you're able to actually go, what sorts of people do this job well? What sorts of personalities do we want to go for? What sorts of qualifications do we want to go for? And you're able to select for that population. And you get a higher quality of worker, which means that the people that are in that institution get a higher quality of care or life, or they are more easily managed without any sort of issue. When you don't do that, for those who don't know, because there's one name that I'm not sure if I've seen around before. By the way, hello, Charming Cthulhu. I'm not sure if I've seen you around before. Good to see you. I used to be a corrections officer. And I was a corrections officer not for very long, about 2 years. While I was a corrections officer, we were critically understaffed. We were critically and chronically understaffed. And that meant that we were hiring people that they would have their first day down from academy. Oh, cool. You're from Ranting Monkey? Awesome to have you around, man. That's how a lot of us ended up meeting in the first place. We were fans of the Lords of the Night and just ended up chatting with each other, and so Minions was born.
I've seen you around. It's just one of those things where, like, because our community is, it's big and it's small, you know, and it's kind of drifted, and sometimes it comes back, you know. So like
it ebbs and flows.
Yeah, it really does. Like, I've kind of been visiting people that I haven't talked to in years and stuff like that. Even some lefties that I haven't talked to in years, just to see how they are now. Like, you know, if they're still talking bullshit. And some people have calmed down. You know, some people really have. And I think some people are really regretting their choices. And I'm laughing at Shoe on Head because I've never known her personally, but I'm laughing at her because I think she is regretting her choice.
But yeah, so when I worked correction, we were chronically and critically understaffed, which meant that the standards started to slip. The vast majority of the people that I worked with were fucking salt of the earth, amazing goddamn people. Still are amazing goddamn people. But we would get these people fresh from academy, and a good number of them, we would be going, yeah, this person's going to be fantastic. They're going to make a great correction officer. But there'd be a fair number that we're going, there's something off. Don't know what, but there's something off.
There really is. There
And when I was working there, like I said, I worked for about 2 years. And it was about, on average, once a month, one female officer would be walked and locked for turning dirty. And occasionally a male officer would be walked and locked for turning dirty or just being an absolute shithead. To the point where it was dangerous for other people. And they only got a job because the standards were slipping. If we had as many people as we needed, we were fully staffed and we were just occasionally filling a new position or filling a position from someone retiring, it would have been one thing, because then we would have been able to be choosy. And a lot of those people we would have gotten rid of. They would have shown up to the interview process, and it would have been a, thank you for coming to this interview. We will not be pursuing this. Have a good day. And they would have been unasked. But we were understaffed, so they started getting hired. And that kept on meaning that we would have problems with people smuggling. We'd have problems with people fucking offenders.
Mm-hmm.
We would have problems with all kinds of shit like that that should not happen. And it was the same thing when it came to the state facilities. When it was asylums, asylums started to be just absolutely filled up with people to the point where there were pictures from asylums where all the rooms in the asylum were full. So they started sticking beds in the hallways. And they stuck more people in the asylum. That's not a healthy facility. That's not a facility being run how it should be run. And then not only was that happening, but you were having a harder time staffing the facilities. And what happens when you have a harder time staffing facilities? Your standards slide. And you start getting people that aren't there because they just want to help out. And they aren't there because a job's a job. No, they're there because they can indulge in their fucked up little fantasies.
Yep.
So asylums started having abuse issues.
You know, it's not just that, too. I think a lot of people don't even realize they have those until they're in that situation.
Yeah, some people don't realize it until they're in that situation. Some people, they go into that situation knowing. And if you have full staffing, you have everything set up right, and you're able to be selective, you're able to weed those people out. And you have a healthy, functioning facility. But what happened was, that shit came to light when it came to the asylums. And politicians did the most politician of politician things. They did a big, sweeping solution. And I say solution with massive neon, flashing, sarcastic quotations around it. Because what they did was they went, okay, we're having problems with abuse at asylums. Let's close down all the asylums.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Brilliant.
That seems to be the new theme from the left is like, this thing isn't working, so instead of like trying to tweak it and try to find a way to make it work, we're just gonna stop it all together because that's gonna fix the problem.
Yep.
And it's like, no, actually, I mean, it wasn't perfect, but for at least some people it was helping. So instead of like stopping it, what you want to do is you want to broaden it so it's helping more people, which means, you know, this thing they like to call diversify. That's when you have to diversify the program so it works for more people.
And when it came to the asylums
Mhm.
and they got closed down,
Mhm.
that didn't suddenly make it so that everyone that needed the asylums were cured and no longer needed the asylums, that they would just stay on their medication, because that's where a lot of people do need long-term care facilities like that.
Mhm.
Those long-term care facilities knew how to handle the people because they had training, at least when they were in their best place. They had the training, and they also had the ability to go, no, Mr. Johnson, you will take your medicine. I know it doesn't make you feel great, but you know how you're currently looking over my shoulder talking to the man who you see behind me? There's no man behind me. You need this medicine. And they'd be able to administer the medicine that was needed. What happens to those people now
Mhm.
is all too common. And again, I worked in corrections. I saw a lot of people that fell into this category. What happened was they don't have a facility like that. So when they're on their medicine, they're upstanding citizen. They are just like
Mhm.
anyone else. They're Joe Schmo from Idaho. But they decide to go off their medicine. And they start off and things kind of trickle in. So it's not an obvious, oh shit, they've gone off their medicine. They must have missed their last dose. No, it trickles in. And as it trickles in, the issues get worse. So it ends up going from upstanding citizen to they're having issues, to they're having a lot of issues, to now they're forcing other people away from them because the vast majority of people don't know how to deal with psych issues. So most people have the response of, I'm going to get away from the person who seems like they're crazy.
Mhm.
And they continue to spiral. Eventually, they spiral to the point where they can't hold down a job. So they lose their job. Then they, without any money coming in, can't pay for wherever they're living. So they lose their home. They end up homeless. They continue to spiral because they still aren't on their medicine. Because at this point, they don't have the money to pay for the medicine that they need to be on in order to actually be a normal member of society. Eventually,
Yeah.
it spirals to the point where they commit some act that is severe enough that they end up in prison. They go to prison. They come in completely out of their mind because that's what brought them there in the first place. And they are so disconnected that prison medical is willing and able to give the direction of this medicine will be administered.
Mm.
They administer the medicine. This person then becomes effectively the model offender, the model prisoner at the prison.
Mhm.
They don't cause problems, they're good to go. And they're taking their medicine for a good while. Then they decide they don't like how the medicine feels. They go off the medicine. They start to spiral. That spiral leads them to segregation. Eventually, they've gone off their medicine for a long enough period of time that, again, medical's willing to step in and go, yeah, we're going to administer this medicine, and model offender again.
Mhm.
Rinse and repeat until release, and then rinse and repeat the previous cycle until they get back into the prison. That's what happens with a lot of these cases. And if we had an asylum, we would have a measure that would work. And they would be able to handle these types of people a lot better than prison. Because I can tell you without any doubt in my mind that there's the way that things need to be done in prison in order to maintain proper order and control of the prison. So if an offender acts out, they need to go to segregation. And if they're acting out severely enough, they need to go on OBS or COS. That is the absolute worst process to deal with someone who's a paranoid schizophrenic. Because if you're a paranoid schizophrenic, Jen, pretend that you're a paranoid schizophrenic. And imagine this scenario that I'm going to explain to you. So you feel like everyone's out to get you and everyone's watching you because you're a paranoid schizophrenic. So when you're in the prison population proper, every hour, day and night, someone walks by your cell. In fact, two people walk by your cell and they look into your cell. You've gone off medicine. You're feeling paranoid because every night someone looks in at you. So eventually, this spirals to the point where you end up having to go to SEG because you've acted out. And not only do you have to go to SEG, but you end up on COS or OBS because either you tried to hurt yourself or you tried to hurt someone else. Now, rather than it being every hour, every 30 minutes someone walks by your cell and they look into your cell. And that your cell has a light on. You don't have control over the general light in your cell. Also, because you're in the COS or OBS cell, there's a camera in your cell that you aren't allowed to cover. In the moment that you cover, someone will tell you to uncover your camera. If you don't, people will come in, they will take you to a different cell, and you will again be in a cell with a camera that's on 24 hours a day. Every 15 minutes, someone will take note of whatever you're doing within your cell. Every 30 minutes, someone will pass by your cell looking in to see what you're doing. Does this sound like that would help your paranoid schizophrenia?
No. No.
But this is exactly what needs to be done in order to maintain order at the prison. Because
I do know most of them on the street end up going to the drug peddlers because that's the only place they figure they can get help half the time.
Yep, they'll start self-medicating, which is a big issue as well. Whereas if we had state asylums and we had the proper professionals, proper staffing, all that good shit, and it's done the way that one in West Virginia was done, where, yep, you will be administered your medicine at these times. It will be explained why. We'll make sure that you understand. You will not be able to say, no, I am not taking my antipsychotic. Your antipsychotic will be administered. These people don't go off their meds in that situation. And now you have someone that stays able to live and work because they're kept on their medicine. That's a far better situation than the cycle that I outlined before. But we completely got rid of that because there were abuses at state facilities. So we need to get rid of all state facilities. Kind of like how the fact that there was the Angel of Death means that we naturally got rid of all hospitals, right? And the fact that we had Dr. Shipman in... or we didn't have, but the fact that England had Dr. Shipman meant that all doctors' surgeries in England were promptly shut because of the abuses there, right? I mean, that's naturally what happens. When there's an issue, the solution is you just get rid of everything.
I mean, it's not like the building couldn't be reworked and you just clean out the staff and start over. You know,
Yeah.
you could just start over.
You sack the staff. You find that magical pay level where people are looking at the job going, yeah, I'm going to go work that job. It's not the greatest job in the world, but the pay makes it worthwhile. And you have the proper staffing. You're able to be selective, so your people are getting the proper care. That's the way that you fix that issue. You don't fix that issue by throwing the baby out with the bathwater and just unassing people onto the streets.
And the other thing people have to understand, it's not about jumping through hoops. It's really about making sure that you do find the right people. Because yeah, it is
Yep.
a thing. We already know psychologically that some people just can't handle being in power.
Yep.
Some people can't handle caring for others. And I was gonna say this earlier, but it makes me sound very MRA. But this assumption that everybody has that women are automatically a nightingale is really dishonest. Because
Mhm.
some women are nightingales, but they're only nightingales for their own family. You know, when you really think about it, not
And
every
some not even then.
not even then, not every woman is nurturing to everybody. It's just an unfortunate fact. We are more nurturing, yes, we are, but not everybody. And a lot of times it's neglect from women who just they don't get it. They really don't get it. They can't. They're not they're
Hold on,
not
can you repeat that? Because I want to write this down. Not
not every
every
woman is a
woman
nightingale.
is a knight and gales.
Hmm.
Nightingale.
Okay,
Word.
night
She
nightingales.
was a famous nurse because she
Yes,
was. She
Florence
was,
Nightingale.
she
She
was
donned the armor and fought the gales of the night.
but
No,
no,
that's the Gale in the Night.
yeah.
It's an
Oh,
entirely different story.
fought the gales in the
She
night.
she she is an example that most nurses try to replicate. And she was legit someone to look up to, but it's just not every woman is geared like that. And I admire the ones who are. I really do, and everyone should because it's not everyone
No,
is.
I get what you're saying.
But
But
for the
but
ones who aren't, they're the worst people to put in charge of others because they will unintentionally neglect, even if they're not really necessarily cruel or bad people. They will unintentionally neglect because they're not thinking about the other person's needs. They're not geared that way.
Yep, it's kind of like how I really wish there was some way to test a specific aspect of people that wanted to be correction officers.
Mhm,
But I can't think of a good way of testing.
mhm.
At least not without potentially fucking with someone by accident. So
Sorry,
the thing,
I just want to throw something out real quick. I'm not meaning to offend MRAs either. I'm just not strictly one. I'm not a part of
yep,
your club either.
the thing that I wish there was some easy way of testing is seeing what someone's response was to someone else yelling at them
Mhm,
and getting aggressive.
mhm.
Because the vast majority of people do the worst possible way of handling that. Because, out of curiosity, have either of you been in a situation where someone starts getting aggressive and starts blading and shouting at you?
Mhm,
yeah,
mhm.
How did you respond verbally?
I looked at his girlfriend and I said, "I'm really sorry, but you should start running now."
So part of that was right, part of that was wrong.
Yeah, I completely wanted to ignore the guy. I mean, I eventually ended up turning on the guy because I was like, "Listen, if you keep following me and yelling at me, I'm gonna go seek a place and call the cops."
Yeah, the best or absolute worst thing, which is the one that most people end up doing, is someone gets loud,
Hmm.
so they get louder.
Hmm.
And then that person who first got loud gets louder, and then the person who got loud in response gets louder.
yeah, like escalation.
Yeah, it's escalation, and it is a positive feedback loop. And what also tends to happen is if someone's threatening you, this is where Jen got the wrong part of the answer.
Oh,
The person who just got threatened often threatens back.
Yeah.
That's also the worst way to handle it. The proper way of dealing with someone who's getting loud and getting aggressive,
It's probably to walk away.
no, that's
No?
the word, or that is a bad option as well.
Ah.
What
what?
you do Yeah, it's a bad option. If someone is getting aggressive and getting loud and you walk away, that sends the wrong message. What
I
you
heard a
do,
message. I say walk away because fuck that guy. I don't want to deal with that guy.
what you do is very, very simple. And I'm doing it right now. You sound bored.
Mm.
You don't get angry. You don't get loud. You meet their eyes. You tell them what needs to be done. And you sound bored. Because when you sound bored, this is something that I figured out when I was an EMT. So when someone's getting angry and they're shouting and you shout back, they get more pissed off.
Mm.
So it ramps them up. And also, a lot of people, when they're angry and they're kind of wanting to do a bit of violence, they need a dance partner for that. So they need someone that will meet that, and it'll allow them to ramp up, and it'll push them over that last little bit that they need in order to actually have the will to do the violence that they were intending.
I mean, to be honest, nobody wants to dance alone.
Yep. If you sound bored, it does several things. First off, if you sound bored and you sound bored in a lower voice, and by lower, I mean softer voice,
Nobody wants to dance alone.
then what
Wait, no, that's
happens
like a Arnold Schwarzenegger. Never
is
mind.
the person that was yelling a moment ago, they now need to kind of listen in order to hear what you're saying back, rather than just being able to shout back and forth and just try to be louder. Now, if they continue shouting, they don't hear a damn thing that you're saying. But it's just in people's minds that what the fuck are they saying?
Mm-hmm.
So rather than ramping them up, it kind of like plunges them into a bath of ice. Because now they're having to kind of listen in order to figure out what the fuck you're saying. Also, a lot of people, like I said, that ramping up, it is something that
You're making me feel like we're just a bunch of dogs.
to a certain extent, kind of. To a certain extent, yeah, this is something that carries over rather well. So when it comes to that ramping up, like I said, it's one of the ways people work themselves up to do violence. And it's they get angrier each time that they ramp up, and they're more willing to do violence. And also, have you ever seen two guys? One of them is not concerned at all about the other, and the other one's trying to start a fight. But the first one just can't give less of a shit. Because he's not threatened at all. The guy who's not threatened at all normally stays calm. Which is where that sounding bored comes in. Because what happens is this person who is trying to get revved up, trying to get the feedback that they need in order to be willing to throw that first punch and get it in.
You know what? I'm going right back to my Italia times when Russia used to say you never want to show the enemy the fear. So just keep smiling and be kind and gentle and friendly. And then when they're not looking, you beat the shit out of them.
Kind of. So by staying with a soft voice that sounds bored, it just puts this into their mind that No, I'm trying to do violent. Why isn't this person reacting? Why aren't they acting scared? Why aren't they getting pissed? What the fuck's happening? Why do they seem like they're in complete control? This isn't good. I thought I was in Why do they seem like they're in control? Do they know something that I don't know? Do I really want to fight this person? They seem way too fucking calm. Is that bad? And they start psyching themselves out.
That's exactly it, though, because the thing with the Russia quote is, like, whenever he's being super nice and friendly, there's a good chance he's really pissed off at you. So there's always an assumed black cloud of doom hovering behind him. And this is something that people do know to think about. Like, the quiet guy, you don't know what's going on behind his... Because he's not telling you everything.
Yep.
He's letting you know that he's in more control than you by being calm. So when he does go nuts on you, you don't know what he's going to pull out of his pocket.
This is very closely related to the EMS trick that I uploaded on my channel for dealing with someone who's going through a panic attack. Mm-hmm. It's the same sort of thought process behind it. Because the person going through a panic attack, part of the reason why a lot of people go through panic attacks is they start spiraling into the I'm not in control. Is anyone really in control? If no one's in control, then everything's going crazy. And what the fuck's going on? What's going on? What's going on? And they start spiraling and they start picking up this, oh my god, no one's in control. I'm not in control. This is goddamn terrifying. Let me off. Mm-hmm. Which, again, for dealing with that, my suggestion is talk softly and just sound...
Carry a big stick.
Bored.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Sound ridiculously bored. Because when you sound bored... Have you ever seen anyone who's panicking while being bored? Those are two diametrically opposed things, aren't they? Mm-hmm. Have you ever seen someone angry and bored?
Yeah, it's a cat thing to do, actually. It's a very cat thing to do.
Yeah. It's...
Look like you're completely ignoring the situation, like, meh, this is, like, the least of my worries. I got better things to do.
Yeah. Because being bored just kind of sends this signal of, I'm in control. Doesn't matter what's going on. Because I control it. Why do I need to be angry? Why do I need to be scared? Why do I need to worry about this? I don't. It's all in hand.
Well, here's the thing, Mr. Adam. When you're in that mindset, if you're in that mindset and you're manipulating, then you are technically in control.
Yeah. It's
the Gumby.
quickest way of dealing with that shit, in my experience. I had several offenders that, when I was working as a correction officer, started trying to get revved up, started trying to get into that I'm going to do violence. And I knew that they were. I just could not give a shit. So I told them, you're going to switch in. I'm just going to stand here. Go switch in. And they would start trying to get me riled up. I told you, go switch in, so go switch in. And every single time that I was dealing with someone like that, every single time that I responded that way, the response was always the same, and it was something that I had to resist bursting out in laughter due to, because there would be this dude who's in prison for assault or murder or horrendous shit, because I worked at a level 4 facility, or a level 4 and 5 facility rather. So I dealt with the most violent offenders effectively. And this person who's in prison for doing something really fucked up and violent would glare at me while going to their cell, continuing to glare at me, grab their cell doors, pull their cell doors shut while continuing to glare at me, pull them in the other direction to show me that the cell door is locked, and then raise their hands like, what are you going to do about it? And I'd just go, thank you. And they would go into their cell and just settle the fuck down. Every single time. It was without fucking fail. They would glare at me like a petulant goddamn child while doing exactly what I told them to do. And that's the trick that EMTs need to know. Police officers should fucking know. Correction officers need to know. Don't get pissed. Don't start cursing. Don't start getting loud. There's one time that you get loud, and that is if they are yelling louder, then or they're continuing to yell loud, and they are not quieting down. They haven't even realized that you're talking to them. Then you're allowed a, hey, what the fuck you doing? And then go board. Mm-hmm. You don't do the, hey, and then stay loud. You get that loud so that it's this quick snap of something's happening, and then you go board. That's what you do. And EMTs should know the go board trick because, again, you're dealing with someone who's having a panic attack. You sound bored. You start telling them, okay, ignore everything else. Just listen to the sound of my voice. You and I are going to breathe. I'm going to tell you when to breathe. I'm going to tell you when to inhale. I'm going to tell you when to exhale. You're going to inhale on 4 count. I'm going to be counting for you. You're going to exhale on a 4 count. I'm going to be counting for you. Let's begin. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. And the person who is having a panic attack and hyperventilating, the vast majority of the time, will focus in on your voice. And they'll go from damn near hyperventilating, looking like they're about to pass out, to just focusing on your voice and breathing when you tell them to breathe. And exhaling when you tell them to exhale. And then, as you do that, each time that you count off, you slow it down. So you start off the first time of just listen to the sound of my voice, ignore everything else. Just my voice and you and I exist.
Yeah, a little bit of
just pay
hypnotism.
attention to me.
Yeah.
Breathe in. 1, 2, 3. Breathe out. 1, 2, 3. And then when you're ending and they're just about completely calmed down, you'll be doing a breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4. You doing better now? Everything calm? You space it out as you go, because that steps them down. And like I said, part of the panic attack is I'm not in control. No one's in control. What the fuck's going on? And when you sound bored, suddenly it's this, they're in control.
Hey, honestly, Doc, I've been, after that breathing exercise, I'm feeling kind of good.
Sorry, I had to make that crack about the hypnosis, because that's technically what that is.
It is somewhat borrowing from hypnosis, only getting rid of the bullshit about it.
Yeah, you're not going further than that either, though, because hypnosis is taking the relaxation down a hell of a lot further than that. But you're getting them to breathing normally hard, but
returning them back to normal pacing and getting their mind focused on something, because Once you get their mind focused on something other than, oh shit, this is scary, no one's in control, what the hell, the world is chaos, everything's going to end. And you get them focused on
Kinda
a deep
short-sighted.
voice telling me to breathe. Let me breathe.
Yeah, it's one of those things you gotta appreciate about the human body. Or people who study it. It is like the human brain is like a supercomputer. Like the dumbest people on the planet are still walking around with a supercomputer effectively. You know, in comparison to other species. So when we go overboard and high wire ourselves, yeah,
Mhm.
it's absolutely understandable that we have mental illnesses out the wazoo, or like just that people have so many different problems with their brain, because we are all supercomputers. It's just we're not all necessarily smart computers, you know?
And I really like Charming Cthulhu's. And then after 4, you will believe you're a chicken.
Right?
But yeah, it's a trick that, like I said, it works for calming people down when they're in a panic.
Mhm.
So I think it's something that every EMT should know. Because, yeah, you will get a panic attack patient that you can't administer anything to them at that time because either you've administered everything that you can already, or it's above your level of training to administer anything more than what you've done. So all you're left with is, can I calm them down by some other measure? Because if you can't, what happens with a panic attack patient that is hyperventilating is they will eventually hyperventilate themselves to the point where they pass out.
Mm-hmm.
Then their breathing will return to normal. They'll eventually wake up from passing out, and they may or may not be calm. If they aren't calm, they hyperventilate until they pass out.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not a fun cycle to see happen. Thankfully, I have never had to witness that firsthand. I've heard other people explain having to witness their patient hyperventilate, pass out, wake up, hyperventilate, pass out, wake up, with them just sitting there going, oh. And like I said, same thing for correction officers, because it works when dealing with someone who's getting riled up. Same thing with police officers, works when someone's getting riled up.
Mhm.
Same thing with goddamn club bouncers.
Yep.
Anyone that deals with someone in a heightened emotional state should know the soundboard trick. And while, yes, the soundboard trick does work a bit better if you're also physically imposing, you don't need to be physically imposing to get a good amount of the result from the soundboard trick. Because guys smaller than me have done the soundboard trick, and it works.
Yeah.
And not only that, Charming, but you can lose your entire licensing. He said, if you're not trained to do something and you do it wrong, not only can you be sued by the person you're administering to, but you could do some serious harm. Those are both extremely important things, but also you can completely lose your licensing. And in that sort of situation, that can result in effective blackballing from ever getting your licensing back as well.
Mm-hmm.
And in every state in the country, you need to have your certification for that state in order to practice, with the exception of if you're traveling through a state. So let's say you live in Virginia,
Mm-hmm.
and you're on vacation. You're traveling up to Pennsylvania. If while you're traveling, or even while you're on vacation, something happens around you, and you practice care up to the point that you are certified in Virginia,
Mm-hmm.
most areas of the country will go, okay, yep, that was Good Samaritan law.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way that it's normally referred to. Good Samaritan law.
Well, they'd rather that you still help.
Yeah.
You know, they don't want to discourage you from helping. They just want to make sure that what you're doing is at least to par with somebody.
Yep. But if, let's say, you were living in Virginia and then you moved to Wyoming, just to pick a random state, then you need to recertify in Wyoming. You can't just go, well, I have a Virginia license that hasn't expired yet, so I'm able to act as an EMT. No. You've now moved. Get the licensing where you're living. If you're traveling, like I said, you can be protected under Good Samaritan law. And also, when you have that type of certification, it's something that a lot of people don't understand what it means. So you have the obligation to do what you can do as far as your training when you are on the job and when you identify yourself. You also have the obligation, if you're off the job, you witness something happen, and then you identify yourself to the person that the issue is happening to.
Does that include retirees then for that one? Like
If
it was just retired and, you know...
If someone's retired, but their licensing, their certification is still valid, and they witness, let's say it's a retired paramedic that is driving home one night, and they haven't had anything to drink, because if you've had anything to drink, don't do shit, effectively.
Yeah.
Be
the guy who calls.
Yeah. If you're sober of sound mind and body, and you're driving home from, I don't know, visiting your friend, and a massive car wreck happens in front of you.
Yeah.
You have several different options of what you can do. Option 1, you can call 911 just like you're a civilian and act entirely as if you are a civilian, an untrained civilian. That's a valid option. You won't get in trouble for that.
Yeah.
Option 2, the most dickish of all the options, you can do absolutely fuck all and continue driving.
Yeah.
You are under no legal obligation. Option 3, you can stop, you can identify yourself to the people that are affected and offer aid. If they are alert, you have to offer. They say yes or no. If they say yes, you render aid. If they say no, then revert to option 1. At least if they're of sound mind when they say no. If you stop and you decide that you're willing to help, and you go towards them to identify yourself, and you realize that the person that you're going towards is unconscious. This is what falls into the realm of what's called implied consent.
Yeah.
So if you're working on the job and you show up to someone who's passed out, implied consent carries you through. You're good to go. You render care as you're directed. And yes, I was going to bring up DNRs here in a moment. Charming. So you render care as far as your training allows. If they're blacked out, you're good to go. Fantastic. If you arrive to the scene, and let's go for the clearest example first. So you arrive to the scene, one person's unconscious, another person in their vehicle is completely there mentally. You identify yourself to the person that's there. You offer care while you start evaluating the person who's unconscious, because implied consent. The person who is conscious looks at you, says they have a DNR, and then they pull a copy of the DNR out of the glove compartment, and they hand you the proper copy of the DNR. So, in this case, it would have to be the durable DNR. So there's durable, and then there's non-durable DNRs. So a durable DNR would be a fully filled out DNR with the patient's signature and the doctor's signature, or if the patient is non-compos mentis, it has to be their power of attorney and a doctor. If they have all the proper paperwork, when they say that person has a DNR, then you are not allowed to do resuscitation methods. You can treat them in non-resuscitative manners. So, for instance, they have a cut on their head. You can slap a bandage on that. No problem. You're worried about their C-spine. You have a C-spine collar, you can put a C-spine collar on them. You're good to go on that. If you notice that they aren't breathing, no CPR. Do not do CPR. If you have a defibrillator on you and you check their pulse and you notice that they don't have a pulse, do not put that defibrillator on them if you have a copy of their DNR. No resuscitative methods. Everything up to resuscitative methods, unless there's certain versions in certain areas. This isn't true for every area of the nation, but certain areas of the nation allow for effectively an itemized DNR, which could have like yes to rescue breathing, but no to full CPR. So you aren't allowed to do chest compressions on that person, but you can do rescue breathing. Even though in a state that doesn't allow an itemized DNR, you aren't allowed to do rescue breathing. It's a no entirely on all resuscitative, but some allow an itemized, and then you can do what it says on that DNR that you're allowed an itemized. So I just got asked a very difficult question by Charming, which is, how would you class an open chest wound that requires a chest seal and the needle for recreating the pressure that you puncture the lung with? So we're assuming they're unconscious at this point. Right, Charming? Because it's possible for you to notice that you would need to do that while the person's still conscious. And that would be a different situation than if they're unconscious. Well, he's catching up to that question. So you're allowed non-resuscitative. So they're unconscious. Their heart is still beating. I'm assuming this is effectively, are we doing full collapsed lungs or one collapsed lung? Because if it's one collapsed lung, then you could fairly easily argue that this is not a resuscitative measure. It's a quality of life measure. And this also, I think, somewhat depends on the area of the country that you are. Because, like I said, itemized. So, gunshot wound. So that would be one. I would argue that you could argue that that is a non-resuscitative measure. Because you aren't reviving the person, nor are you venting them for sustaining their life. What you're doing is you're treating the injury. So, okay, yeah. I thought I remembered that correct. It's been a bit since I've been an EMT, but yeah, I remembered that being the right way of approaching that. So, like I said, you're allowed non-resuscitative care. You aren't allowed resuscitative care. If you arrive on scene, the person's unconscious, the person in the side is conscious, and you start rendering care after identifying yourself to the conscious person, and they say they have a DNR, but they aren't able to produce the DNR. The way that it worked, at the very least, in the areas that I was certified in, if you do not have the hard copy of the DNR, or there's, I think, one or two national jewelry brands that have a DNR bracelet that is actually a recognized DNR bracelet, where they have to get all the paperwork for the DNR jewelry before they'll actually send out the DNR jewelry. Then if they don't have the paperwork and they don't have that specific type of jewelry, you do not count it as a DNR, because you have to have that copy. Which means that you might resuscitate a person who will then be very pissed off, but in the areas that I worked, it was still considered you acted in good faith with the information that you had available. Because you need to make sure that all of that info is 100%. Because when you're shown a DNR, like I said, you need to check patient signature, doctor signature, if not patient, power of attorney. And you need to make sure that it's a durable DNR that is valid. There's some DNRs that you can get that are temporary DNRs. So it's like if someone's undergoing cancer treatment, they can decide that they want to get a DNR and they can have it valid for, at least in the areas I worked in, they could have a DNR that was valid for 1 year from a specific date. And it would be enough time for their predicted cancer regimen. And they would get that DNR. That way, if they died, or if they went unresponsive to the point where they would need resuscitation during the process of their treatment, they could say that they do not want to be resuscitated. And it would be a durable but limited DNR. And if you were given one of those, you had to make sure from this date, for this period of time, today's date is April 10th, 2021. This was a year from June 2020. It's still under, I'm not allowed to do anything. If you do not have a copy of a DNR, then you act as if there is no DNR, even if you're told by a patient's family member that there is a DNR. You have to have that DNR in your hand. Or, like I said, there's one or two types of nationally recognized DNR jewelry that you can get, that they require complete evidence and complete documentation that the DNR is valid before they'll ship the jewelry. So those are recognized.
I have an awkward question.
Yep.
Based off the topic. Just thinking as a Canadian. This is stuff I have thought about before, but just never looked into. But say I cross the border and doom befalls me, I'm in a car accident and I die. I do have it on my birth certificate that I'm an organ donor. Does that mean that you guys take it?
So you're an organ donor if you pass away, and so let's say you get into a car accident.
Mm-hmm.
EMS responds. They begin their assessment. They begin their treatment if it's applicable.
Yeah.
And you pass either your DOA or you pass in the ambulance.
Yeah.
Then you are taken to, if you pass in the ambulance, you're taken to the receiving facility morgue, effectively. Or some, depending on the facility, some facilities will have you first go to ER, confirmed by the doc, then go to the morgue. Some facilities in some jurisdictions, they will have you call into the hospital, report all of the signs of the person passing. So let's say rather than it just being an EMT, you had a full critical care paramedic sent out to the scene of your crash.
Yeah.
And they're able to do a full EKG, and they have the EKG running. You are completely arrhythmic. Not even arrhythmic. You're just flatlining, because arrhythmic can technically be flatline, or it can be a completely random mess. But you're completely flatlined. They could then, because you don't have a DNR, call in, potentially get direction to shock you, even though most of the time that wouldn't be the thing with the complete flatline. That's normally an AFib, which AFib is one of the arrhythmic issues. It's effectively the atrial fibrillation. AFib is one part of the heart, or potentially two parts of the heart, are kind of wriggling like they're full of worms. And it's this so normal heartbeat's supposed to have that lub dub. The lub is the atrium contracting. The dub is the ventricle contracting. And in the pulse, when you feel that, it's the heart contraction is the first bit, and then the venous contraction or the arterial contraction is the second bit. But when you're talking about the heart rhythm, it's atrium, ventricle. And AFib is the atrium is just writhing erratically. So it isn't actually pumping blood from the atrium into the ventricle, or depending on which side, isn't from the atrium to the ventricle, or isn't from the atrium out. So, no, it'd still be atrium, ventricle, either way. So, one of those sides isn't working, or possibly both of those sides aren't working. The shock is meant to kind of reset the AV node, which is the atrioventricular node, which controls the pacing of the beats of your heart, which is something that is in the heart itself, which is why you can take out someone's heart and stick it in someone else and still have it continue to beat, without any issue because it's really hard to rewire that back to the brain. So you end up relying mostly on the AV node because the brain controls the heartbeat as well as the AV node controls the heartbeat. So the AV node is a self-contained electrical portion that causes it to beat. So if you have atricular fibrillation, you can shock. There's a couple other erratic beats that you can also shock. You're allowed to shock more if you have the full imaging rather than if you just have a standard fireman-proof AED. AED will only recognize one or two different arrhythmias, whereas the full kit that a paramedic carries is able to be used on any rhythm that the paramedic desires. So if you pass, they're able to demonstrate that you passed. They'll call to the hospital, report what happened. The hospital will either say, bring them in to the ER, will confirm, or depending on the area, depending on the facility, the doctor will call the time of death given the information from the paramedic and EMS. Mm-hmm. If that's the case and you're an organ donor, then you will be taken to the morgue first thing. Then it's from the morgue that they will then take you to whatever surgical suite, effectively an autopsy suite at this point, where they will extract whatever organs they can.
Yeah.
And then those will, depending on where they need to go in order to be implanted into a person. If it's just in the facility, they will be taken immediately to whatever surgical suite that person's in and be slapped into that person, sewn in, good to go. If it's your heart is a match to someone who's in the neighboring town or neighboring city, then there's one of two routes that it can arrive there. There's med flights that do organ transports.
Okay.
And
yeah, that part's reassuring.
With that, what happens is the organ gets packaged so that it will remain viable. It's taken up to the helipad. It's handed off to a med flight crew. The med flight crew flies to the other hospital, lands on its helipad, goes in with the organ, good to go. If the receiving facility does not have a helipad for a med flight transport, then it can go for depending on the ambulance services in the area, there's certain private ambulance companies that do allow for organ transport. And then there's also effectively specialty medical couriers. So it can go either by one of the companies that allows for organ transport, or it can go by a specialty medical courier.
Okay. Yeah, that part's reassuring. Like, I don't doubt that there's lots of my body that they're going to reject anyway, just because I was a dirty smoker. Just by default, that cancels out probably my heart too, in all honesty. That doesn't mean everything is useless. Just, I'm pretty sure that one's probably not in the highest of ropes. But the interesting one was actually my eyes, because it's not that I haven't donated those. It's just I'm very, very nearsighted. So I don't know how that would work in that regard. So I donated those more to science than anything else. So it was just, I was sitting there thinking, so like, if I ever go to Japan and say I'm just unlucky, I'm on a train and just luck strikes and I'm just fucked, and I die, and I'm like, are they going to study my eyes in Japan? Because that would be cool, kind of.
There's a number of agreements that could happen. So it could be that your eyes will be studied in Japan if there's an agreement between the US and Japan with a group that is supposed to get the eyes. Or it could be that the eyes will be preserved in the way that they need to be preserved and then sent So this is something that not a lot of people probably know.
Yeah.
Sometimes that shit gets sent on passenger planes.
Yeah.
Just like a good chunk of passenger planes have
On
a
passenger planes?
coffin
What?
or a
Wait,
casket in the back as well.
I could see that. Like, I mean, if it's just for science, like like I said, I wouldn't be offended if it was in Japan. Like if because they could do that anyway. They could study my eyes in China or in Canada and be like, you know what, these are really interesting. Let's send them to Japan and see what they think.
Yeah, and it's possible. Like I said, it depends on what agreements are in place between the different nations. Some of them have research agreements, some of them don't. Some of them have exchanges and shit like that going on. And to respond to a couple things that were said in chat, yeah, CPR is an absolute son of a bitch, and nothing will make you feel like more of a monster than having to perform CPR on someone that's like 80 plus because they nor their family signed a DNR. And snap, crackle, pop takes on an entirely different meaning when you have to do that. Then, yeah, it's not uncommon for CPR to not be sufficient. And a lot of EMS departments are getting a really cool device now. It goes by a couple different names. The one that I was most familiar with was just the Thumper, and it's a automated CPR machine. It's just this device that has effectively a padded piston that performs the compressions at the right rate, rather than having people manually do it. And if you ever have to do it, there's a couple different songs that you can think of. If you're a fan of old school disco, Staying Alive. If you aren't a fan of disco, but you are a fan of Star Wars, The Imperial March.
Yeah.
Both of those have the right rhythm for CPR. So you can do CPR to those. And
So just to answer Cthulhu, so the two things about my eyes that would make me fascinated to see what a Japanese person would think is, so like
they're round.
Well, there's that. Yeah, there's that. But my prescription is one of those ones that's kind of rare because like I am very nearsighted. Like I'm it's like looking through well, not even a telescope, but it's the opposite. I can't see shit. It's such a level of nearsightedness that like I might as well look through a microscope, is what my doctor told me. But my eyes are also really, really blue. Like I happen to have one of those really sharp shades. So it's just one of those things where like the idea of a Japanese person or an Asian person studying them, because that could happen in Canada anyway. It's not like there's not Japanese or Asian community in my country. It's just the idea of that happening in a different country altogether, where they might never have seen blue eyes to begin with. I just think that would be cool. There's a part of me that thinks that would be cool, just outright. Like, if somebody who had never seen blue eyes before, just their first study was on my eyes, that would be fucking awesome.
Oh, and also, just as another thing that people don't know about EMS, one thing that I lived in dread of when I was in EMS was there's something that not many people know, and that is any of the signatories to the DNR can actually overturn the DNR just by saying they do. So the thing that I lived in dread of when I was working in EMS was the power of attorney riding in the ambulance with their family member when their family member stops breathing. Because the power of attorney has the right and the ability to say that the DNR is void. At which point, you have to start trying to resuscitate someone that you know should not be resuscitated. But because they've rescinded the DNR, they're now supposed to be resuscitated. It is one thing that I desperately hoped that I never had to deal with. But yeah, staying alive and the Imperial March. So if you're ever having to do CPR and you get you aren't sure how fast to beat, the bum 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 ba-dum bum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum bum ba-dum every downbeat. And yes, we are. I was just noticing the time, Sora, and I was about to send us around the horn to sign off. I got carried away in talk of EMS and corrections.
He also got me thinking of some guy thumping on some guy's chest to the beat of Star Wars. So I was like, that's awesome.
Like I said, Imperial March and Staying Alive, or if you want the more morbid version of Staying Alive, Buried Alive. Because that was one of the original lyrics for Staying Alive, rather than the staying alive, staying alive. It was buried alive, buried alive.
No, it wasn't. Was it?
Yeah, it was. Just like the second version of Yesterday is fucking weird and hilarious because they thought that they had heard the song elsewhere. So they rewrote all the lyrics. So rather than Yesterday, all my troubles seem so far away, the verse that they swapped that out for was scrambled eggs, oh baby, how I love your legs. But yes, who wants to go first in their parting words? And for pictures of frogs, Charming Cthulhu, you have a couple different options on the Discord. You can put them in, if it's a meme, then you can put them in meme. If it's something that you took, you could slap it in art. Or if it's just an animal picture, if I remember correctly, we do have effectively an animal room that you can toss that in. So any of those three are equally valid.
Jeez, I got a bad feeling about this.
But yes, who wants to go first?
Ladies first.
Oh, I knew you were gonna do it.
Maybe you should have been quicker.
Yeah.
No, I wasn't sure. I was like, should I just go and do it? And then I thought, you know what? I wonder if he's gonna call me on it.
Come on. You know as much as I hate to say it, I guess I'm old fashioned there.
Oh no, it's fine. It's fine. I mean, we're ending this one on a dark note anyway, which I find, like, I do find the topic
Dark
interesting.
note.
Yeah,
That's not a dark note.
Dark note. You know, like if I go to Japan or if I go to America and I die, which I mean, I'm not planning that. Like if I were to go, I was planning a good vacation. But you know, I'm fully.
Well, I mean, I have no problem opening and holding the door open for people. You know, it's called courtesy.
But if I ever do go to Japan and there's gonna be an earthquake, I want it to be because of Godzilla. That's my parting words.
Yeah.
Gojira.
Well, that'd be cool.
And then they could be like, well, this is her fault.
Yo, that's the thing. That's the when we were watching Godzilla versus King Kong, I was sitting there. It's like, you know, people are pissed off about, like, oh, what about the people dying from all the buildings and shit, and you know, Godzilla's just shooting his lasers, and it's like, dude, how often do you get to say, yeah, I died from Godzilla's fire? You know, like, that's
Mhm.
There's only a okay, never mind, because that's we should probably I'd say it off air because otherwise no, you
Nice.
get yeah, never mind. Jeez. Can we redo the goodbye thing? Can we
Well,
reset
you
that?
can start your parting words again if you want.
Oh, okay. All right. Let's do this next take. Hey, well, thanks for letting me join the chat.
Always fun
Um,
having you.
yeah, and as always, love you all and God bless. Take care, guys.
And I'll leave off with my old standard of if you're passionate about something, make sure that you devour it. Don't let it devour you. And with that, have a good night, all. The zoo is closed.
Unless your passion is hookers. Sorry, I couldn't help myself.
Okay.
I don't know why.
No one's going to say goodbye. I'll say goodbye. Goodbye, people.